Yo, what's good, guys? Not video here. Today we got Geography Now with United Kingdom. Man, this is slowly becoming one of my favorite channels just because it's interesting to hear about other places, you know? But hey, man, let's get it. And buckle up for a long-ass video. This video itself is 47 minutes long, so...
As you know, I'm American.
Do me a favor, if y'all can't watch through this video, because, you know, it's gonna be long, do me just mute the video and do what you gotta do and just let it play in the background if you can't, because that retention time helps the YouTube channel a little bit, so, like, you know, help a man out.
And I just got my Anglophone family reunion invite, so I guess I have to show up to be polite and all. Hi, Dad.
Time to learn geography.
No!
That would be me. I'm not even gonna lie to y'all. Like, if I ever go anywhere, I already know I'm gonna get those requests. Like, hey, can you make me a video? Like, yeah.
Everyone, I'm your host, Barbs. Get your Geography Now merch, like this Geography Now t-shirt, at geographynow.com. Not selling out if it's your brand. Well, here I am in the big crumpet, the big uck. The land of kings, queens, and in-betweens. At one point, a quarter of the world's population and land area was under their rule. Of course, such a story came with lots of complicated chapters, and when it comes to complication, usually it's best to have a person from the country come along and help out. And for this episode, I could not think of anyone better to speak on behalf of the UK than my go-to Brit. Many of you already know him. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, say hello to Mr. Jay Foreman.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much. I've always wanted to be on Geography Now.
Tell him how we met.
I think I started watching Geography Now back in the Belgium days. You accidentally stole a map from an episode of Map Men, and now we're the best of YouTube friends.
Yeah, I stole your map.
I've probably stolen more from elsewhere.
By the way, Jay, a lot has probably happened over the years. What have you been up to?
This?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You made something.
Yeah, I made one of these.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
he's really good.
Yeah, so let's talk about your country now. Shouts did we.
That is how
You
we...
know, it's funny because, like, I feel like I'm not really watching these in order, right? I'm just kind of watching them either as if I get a request for a certain country, which, hey, feel free to request countries, or, like, if I'm just scrolling through Geography Now and just randomly click on one I feel like watching in the moment, like right now. Like, I'm not watching these in order, but it's crazy just a minute in, this kind of unrelated, but watching, say, the difference in quality from, like, when he did Germany versus when he's doing the UK. Just, you can already tell the levels have gone up.
Talk. So, the UK today is very different from what it used to be. And no, we're not referencing how the island used to be connected to the rest of continental Europe via Doggerland,
And no, we're not
Doggerland.
referencing the Mesolithic Arensbergian hunter-gatherers.
or the Neolithic agriculturalists and enormous stone transporting and solstice measuring peoples.
No, we're referencing a time later on when the entire island was just a mess of clans, chiefdoms, opposing monarchs, and outside monarchs trying to come in and out-monarch the said monarchs.
It wasn't until much later that the country actually
monarchs.
completed unifying everything on the island of Great Britain, plus Northern Ireland, don't forget Northern Ireland, and all the overseas territories, don't forget the overseas territories, and crown dependencies, you can probably forget the crown dependencies.
Yeah, because there's like a whole other thing going on. Oh yeah, and you guys have a town called T.O. I went to B.O. Oh, and of course you can't forget.
Wait, nah, time out. What the fuck are these town names? Okay, you know what? Life goal. Okay? Whenever I can go to the UK one day, I need you guys to, like, send me all these, like, outrageous town names, and I gotta do one big road trip. I don't know, like, take a couple of days, a week. The UK is not that big compared to out here, so I imagine I could knock it out in a week or two, and just we gotta go and visit every single outrageously named town, starting, what's that one called? What's that town? I've seen the other town. I gotta start at fucking. I think it's called fucking. Yes, fucking. We gotta start at fucking, and from fucking we gotta go to Bitchfield. We gotta get a road trip. Come on now.
Stand by to put the fantasy go.
Very good.
Huh?
Very good.
Called T.O.
Yeah. There's a place near here called Trotter's Bottom.
I went to Bitfield. Oh, and of course you can't forget. Stand by to put the fantasy go.
Very
This is supposed to be a fucking English country! Y'all supposed to have names I can pronounce, goddammit! This ain't goddamn Japan or fucking the Philippines or anywhere else, god damn it, with an outrageous language that's not English. Well, the language isn't outrageous. I just can't say half the damn words of other languages. But that's beside the point. Like, nah, I refuse. I'm changing the name of that town to the town of Bobby.
Very good, very
Fuck
good.
y'all.
Actually, speaking of places in Britain, did you know that we've got some of the weirdest and hardest to...
Watch, I'm gonna have somebody take that seriously. Like, they're gonna pause the video. They're gonna write some angry comment about how I got a big ass ego or something because I changed the town name, and they gonna and then they gonna like continue the video, see this, and delete their comment, calling it. If you made an outrageous comment, leave it there. Just leave it there. Just put that edit in. Like, all right, you got me.
Pronounce places
I'll
in the
respect you
world?
for it.
Okay. Leicester, Fromy,
Leicester,
Ruislip,
Chiswick.
Chiswick, Landfall.
Llanelli.
I would have said that.
Llanelli.
Llanelli.
Oh yeah,
So
that's Welsh,
Llanelli.
isn't it?
It is Welsh.
Oh,
That's
those
Welsh.
I
Those
got-
Welshies, you
I gotta pause it before he says it because I will say what he says by default.
can't trust them.
Well, in any case, let's look at the map, shall
Damn it.
we?
First of all, the main chunk of what makes up the UK is Great Britain, located off the northwestern coast of the continental mainland of Europe, north of France, separated by the English Channel, and east of Ireland, separated by the Irish Sea to the east, as well as the North Sea, and to the North Atlantic. The island of Great Britain is made up of 3 constituent countries: England, which holds about 84% of the country's population, Scotland, which holds about 8%, and Wales at about 1.5%.
Hey yo, can we talk about like Scotland's about the same size as England? It looks like ish. England's a bit bigger, but yet it goes from 84% to 8%. That's crazy. Like Wales ain't that big, so like, who cares? Well, that's not. Like I'm talking like population wise, right? Like, it's good enough. Like it's fine. But the Scotland population to landmass is crazy.
From there, they also administer Northern Ireland, which doesn't exactly have an official political title. Some say it's a constituent country, some say it's a region or province, but to this day it lies across the Irish Sea on the northern section of the
Badass
island of
shit.
Ireland, making it their largest land border with any country. Outside of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, though, the UK has 3 crown dependencies and 14 overseas territories, 12 of which are small islands in the Caribbean, Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans, and 2 of them, Gibraltar and the sovereign bases of Akrotiri and Dhekelia, are small areas attached to the larger shared land masses of Spain and Cyprus. Keep in mind the crown dependencies of the Isle of Man, Guernsey, and Jersey are technically not considered part of the UK.
Isle of Man. That's a badass name, bruh. The Isle of Man. Yes, I support that.
But are still subject to the UK's defense and international representation. And finally, the British Antarctic Territory and its main base at Rothera is a section of Antarctica that does not have any actual sovereign status, as all countries are subject to the Antarctic Treaty, which states no one can colonize the continent. The entire domain that falls under the UK's sovereignty spans across 9 time zones. Anyway, back to the main island. This is where things take a twist. First off, keep in mind, each of the constituent countries of Scotland and Wales, as well as whatever you want to label Northern Ireland, has their own parliament system with a head called a
You know what? I want to ask a question, right? Because I don't feel like this is kind of unrelated, but like I don't feel like this will be addressed in this video. Why? Like at one point, y'all owned the entire world. Why did you keep this land, right? Like, why didn't you say keep, I don't know, Germany or the Philippines or, I mean, anywhere, right? This isn't dissing the UK's land itself as much as like when y'all owned the world, why did you guys pick to just hold on to this little area? Is there a reason for that, or is that just kind of how the cookie crumbled?
First Minister, whereas England does not have its own separate parliament, as they just use the same country capital's Westminster Palace building as the meeting place for all English elected constituent officials, since it's pretty much always been the spot used for them anyway, and they see no need to complicate things further. On paper, England has 48 counties, Scotland has 32 council areas, Wales has 22 principal areas, and Northern Ireland has 6 counties. However, keep in mind that many of these are disputed, people don't pay attention to them, and many might just refer to their traditional areas, which is another topic. In any case, the capital and largest city country and largest city in Western Europe is London. After that, it's Manchester at number 2 and Birmingham at number 3. Also, keep in mind the City of London, or the City of London Corporation, has its own separate government, which is independent from the rest of the country. This means that the Lord Mayor of London is technically the highest ranking official in the UK after the monarch, even though the City of London in itself is just one small part of Greater London. London alone has 4 of the top 10 busiest airports in the country.
So why does
Heathrow,
London have its own government? Like, is there, like, what's the history with that?
Gatwick, Stansted, and Luton, whereas outside of the London area, Manchester International comes in at number 3 and Edinburgh International at number 6. Just on the east side of England lies the port of Felixstowe, the largest and busiest shipping port of the country. The country has a very extensive road and rail network, and otherwise, London's Waterloo and Victoria are the largest train stations, and the completion of the Channel in 1994 officially connected the UK to the rest of mainland Europe via France.
Except literally no one calls it the Channel ever.
I call it the Channel.
No, you don't. It's the Channel Tunnel, or the Eurostar, or Le Shuttle, or anything but Channel. No one says Channel.
Calling it Channel. So as you can see, when it comes to the administrative divisions, the UK is quite possibly the biggest nightmare in the world.
And keep in mind, we didn't even mention all the other confusing administrative levels, like combined authority areas, metropolitan counties, lieutenancy areas, or lieutenancy areas, depending how you want to pronounce it, parishes, wards. It's a lot.
Yeah. To help a little bit more on understanding on how all these things actively work, we could mention the 650 constituency system, in which 650 small sections of the country get represented in the parliament with a representative.
Damn!
So complicated. The way we do
I'm sorry, y'all got 650 different. Okay, my question is, how big are these areas, right? Like, because the UK itself, isn't that big of a country to my knowledge, right? You could probably. I'm imagining if you didn't stop at all, you could drive across the UK in at least at most a day, right? I'm about to get humbled severely in the comments for saying that, but I'm assuming so, right? Like, you could probably get across the UK in 10 hours, right? Because y'all always say how massive the US is, so I'm assuming 10 hours you guys could get across the UK. Maybe less, but 10 hours is my safe guess. Like, these 650 sections they can't be that big, can they?
we do things in this country is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it is massively broke, still don't fix it.
Anyway,
Fair enough.
off of that
We agree out here too.
note, the UK has a bicameral legislature consisting of the House of Commons and the House of Lords.
So the House of Commons is the one that you see on the telly, and the House of Lords is the big room next door where they wear robes, and it's weird.
And the Whigs too, right?
Wigs sometimes,
And
yeah.
they're appointed.
So there
That's
are four
real?
ways you can get into the House of Lords. One of them is by giving lots of money to the governing party, and then they sort of, as a favour, make you a lord. But that's not officially how it works. So don't. That's not what I said. The other way is if you're an expert in something like the law or the arts or beer. The other way is if you happen to be born with a dad who's already a hereditary peer.
So it can be hereditary.
It can be hereditary, and you're allowed to become a
wanna
member
be
of the
a
House
lord.
of Lords as long as you don't have any older brothers. Isn't it insane? Some British place names, just from looking at the name,
This
you
is
can
no
tell
fair. I
what
wanna
part of
be
the
a
country
lord.
it's in. So, for example, if it's got a Celtic name, which means it has words like Tre, Loch, Bryn, and Aber, that means you're likely to find it in Wales. Or if it's got a Viking suffix, such as Thwaite, Thorpe, Kirk, or B, that means you're likely to find it in the north. And then there are the Anglo-Saxon place names, such as Ing, Ham, Bury, Ford, Port, and so on and so on.
So you can actually tell which group of people influenced which area based off of the suffix of the name of the place.
Sort of, although that was probably more true hundreds of years ago, and now these days all the names get mixed up and they come up with new place names all the time.
Gotta have that Trotter's bottom.
Trotter's
So all of that brings us to the obvious topic.
How do y'all come up with, okay, in all fairness, the US probably has just as many fucking stupid ass town names. So can I be talking? Probably not. But I want to know, who let a bunch of idiots like myself name the towns? Because that's exactly what I'd be calling the towns. I'd be calling my town would be Fuckface. That's my town, Fuckfaceville.
Topic.
Yes, no, Fuckface for Yes, fuckface Ferg.
UK is a constitutional monarchy.
Technically, the king is in charge, and it's his country and it's his laws, but how this practically works is he's just a ceremonial figurehead, and it's actually the government and the prime minister that make all the actual decisions.
But he could also step in if he wanted to.
Yeah, in theory, he could step in and say, I don't like this law, but he knows full well that if he tried that, there'd be an instant revolution and we'd set Buckingham Palace on fire.
You got another Oliver Cromwell situation. Jay did a lot of videos on this type of
So,
stuff.
like, in that case, then what's the king actually do? Like, if he's not really, like, okay, I'm about to piss a lot of people off saying this too, but if he's not really a king, right? Like, he can't really rule. So he's not truly a king in that aspect of, he's not running shit. So, like, what's he do? Is he actually doing something, or is he just kind of chilling? Because if he's just kind of chilling, I want his job.
We'll just put an annotation. Just check out his videos. Long story short, it wasn't always this way. In fact, the UK's history is more like the combined histories of the three constituent countries of Scotland, England, and Wales, plus a little bit of Northern Ireland, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, even though the UK is a country...
Also, how did... Because, like, obviously, at one point, you know, the king ran shit, right? So, like, at what point did that change and, like, the king lose the power, I guess? Like, how did that all go down? I'm assuming they might explain it further on in this video, so I should probably shut up and play the video, but in case they don't.
Like, the bits that make it up are also called countries.
Yeah, there's no simple way to condense this whole history.
Let's try anyway.
Ancient beaker culture.
Celts arrived and split into the Britons, Gaels and Picts.
Romans failed to conquer the Picts. They build Hadrian's Wall.
Romans leave, in come the Germanic tribes.
Scotland splits into 4 kingdoms.
Egbert becomes the first Saxon king.
And then the Anglo-Saxons split into 7 kingdoms.
Anglo-Saxon, by the way, is where the name England comes from.
Cornwall
falls to Wessex, but keeps its language and culture.
Meanwhile, Wales was made up of many kingdoms, but the largest are Gwynedd, Powys, and Dyfed.
Vikings come in, raid much of the Hebrides Island and Isle of Man.
Scots and Picts joined to create the Kingdom of Alba.
Danish Vikings come in and create the Danelaw. This is also how lots of Danish words crept their way back into modern English, such as leg, window, and yes, even ransack, which was exactly what the Danes were doing.
Anglo-Saxon Ethelsin fights against them and becomes the first king of England. Meanwhile, in the 11th century, Gruffydd ap Llywelyn becomes the only king that ruled over all of Wales, but then it is quickly killed by one of his own people.
William of Normandy takes over England, and thus begins the Norman dynasty.
Angevin Empire via the House of Plantagenets begins.
Crusades! Oops. Richard Lionheart plays a huge role in this.
King John is terrible, and then his barons force him to sign the Magna Carta.
1284, Edward I conquers Wales and integrates it into England, but they maintain their language and culture.
Alexander III of Scotland dies, and 14 rivals claim succession to the throne.
14th century, Charles IV of France dies with no heir, so Edward III was eligible through his mum, but the French were like, hell no, and elected Prince Philip of Valois, and hence began the 100 Years' War.
Yes, this is when the Joan of Arc thing happened.
Edward III dies, many claimants to the throne rise up, and thus begins the War of the Roses.
16th century Tudor dynasty begins, and thus all that crazy Henry VIII stuff goes down.
You know the history, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived.
It's cute because it rhymes.
Damn.
Meanwhile, in 1585, the British take their first stab at colonizing what is now Virginia in the USA, which eventually evolved into the 13 colonies.
Meanwhile, the East India Company begins shortly after.
Elizabeth I's rule leads to the Mary Queen of Scots thing and the Spanish Armada.
17th century, Elizabeth I dies. Closest relative is James VI of Scotland, and he becomes ruler, hence joining Scotland and England for the first time, becoming the first monarch to rule over the entire island of Great Britain.
Let's go! Legend! Legend!
Conspirators try to assassinate him and blow up Parliament, aka the Guy Fawkes thing.
Charles I and Parliament have tensions, and thus begins the English Civil War.
Oliver Cromwell becomes Lord Protector after dissolving the monarchy, but after he dies, the monarchy is restored with Charles II.
Man, you guys really went back to that monarchy thing fast. Like, in the 17th century, Scotland unsuccessfully attempts colonies in Panama and Nova Scotia and has an economic crisis.
1707, the union between Scotland and England is finalized.
Queen Anne dies, ending the House of Stuart, and in comes the House of Hanover.
Wars, and more expensive wars. Great Britain taxes colonies to try and make up for the debt.
Colonies aren't happy, which leads to the War of Independence for America.
USA!
Revolution.
USA! USA! Oh, sorry.
Let's just pass over that whole chapter. Captain James Cook swings by Australia, New Zealand, and hey, let's establish some more penal colonies.
Napoleonic Wars.
East India Company is met with revolt and leads to a full takeover of India in 1858.
Berlin Conference split up areas that European powers would administer in Africa.
World War I, 1921, land grabs from the crumbling German and Ottoman empires resulted in the height of the territorial rule for the UK.
1922, Ireland breaks away.
World War II, the whole Winston Churchill and the Battle of Blitz stuff happened.
Afterwards, one by one, the former territories got their independence.
The Commonwealth of Nations is established.
Joins NATO.
paramilitary violence in Northern Ireland.
Sorry about that. Joins the European Economic Community, which was like a predecessor to the EU.
Monetarism policies are enacted under the Margaret Thatcher years.
Falkland Islands War.
2008 global financial crisis followed by a Scottish referendum ending in remaining part of the UK.
2016, the UK votes at nearly 52% to leave the EU.
Queen Elizabeth II, longest reigning British monarch, passes away.
Right,
Her son
right.
King Charles III is coronated.
Crowned.
So there you go. And
All right, so here's the question: if she was the longest-serving monarch, is King Charles like the oldest man to take the kingship? Just out of curiosity, like, because I'd imagine if she is the oldest ever monarch, that would make him the oldest king to begin being a king. Correct?
oversimplified outline of the thousands of years of like 70, 20, 10% British, Scottish, Welsh history all jammed into a cheesy YouTube skit with minimal props and slapstick humor.
The thing you'll hear most often from people who love the royal family is how good it is for tourism, despite the fact that if we got rid of the monarchy, we could turn Buckingham Palace into a really expensive museum.
But then there wouldn't be a monarch to like fantasize about the fairy tale monarch, princess, king, queen stuff, you know? It's like...
But then maybe King Charles could retrain and get a different job as a chartered quantity
Yeah, but
surveyor.
it takes away the whole fantasy aspect. We think of monarchs as like magical creatures.
That's the problem! Despite an increasing number
That's
of
the
Republicans,
problem.
which in this country means people vying for a republic against the idea of a monarchy, most Brits are okay with the royal family. It has a unique role as both representing longevity and tradition and tabloid fodder.
I don't know, I really do think
mean,
it does.
South Park's funny. So I love me South Park, right? Like South Park's one of my favorite cartoons, and I'm not gonna lie, when they were ripping into that, I was laughing my ass. That's a great episode.
Have a lot to do with
What did British people think of that episode? Y'all should tell me, right? Because like, I feel like y'all probably are a little protective over that family, right? So, because I remember when I did some Queen videos, people were like very appreciative of me doing the videos, and like, you know, a lot of people were sad to see the Queen pass away, which, you know, makes sense. So like, I wonder how y'all felt about that. Let me know.
tourism, and then we come in.
Whereas when Brits go on holiday within our own country, we like to go to the seaside. Places like Southend.
The longest pleasure pier in the world. And speaking of which, we got a guy who kind of saved a lot of people over there, and he's going to do the famous places segment. Come on in, Mr. Tommy Boy.
So, other than Southend Pier, the longest pleasure pier in the world, which I did save by peeing on when it was on fire. True story.
Yo, what a legend. Bro got famous off taking a piss. Yo, dude's one of
Places
them.
you need to visit are London, obviously, St Paul's Cathedral, Buckingham Palace, the London Eye, Tower of London, Tower Bridge, the House of Parliament, Big Ben, red telephone boxes, of which many have now been repurposed, police boxes for you Doctor Who fans, Stonehenge, Seahenge, which isn't even a henge, Silbury Hill, the Royal Ascot and its many funny hats, Bath with its Roman baths, the Jurassic Coast, including Durdle Door, the Ammonites and Fossil Beach in Lyme Regis,
Okay,
Windsor
that's pretty
Castle,
cool.
the Shambles in York, the Peak and Lake Districts, the
Ooh, that landscape looks sweet.
Roman baths, the Jurassic Coast, including Durdle Door, the Ammonites and Fossil Beach in Lyme Regis, Windsor Castle, the Shambles in York, the Peak and Lake.
That looks like, come on now. That is a really cool picture right there.
Lake Districts, the Eden Project. Next, we're going to do Wales. Many castles, including Carnarvon, Conwy, Caerphilly, Cardiff, Snowdonia, with Mount Snowdon, which you can actually go up on a train. Penryn, Slate Quarry, the underground
looks
trampoline
cool.
park in Cleckwood, Dobby
Ooh,
the
that's
House
awesome.
Elf's grave, where people keep leaving their socks. So next, we're going to go up to Scotland. First, you have to start with Edinburgh, with its Royal Mile, Calton Hill, the castles, St Kilda, Orkney and Lewis for Neolithic stone circles, Shetland for ponies, Isle of Skye, Loch Ness, what I personally think is the coolest thing in the whole of the UK, Fingal's Cave. It's on the island of Staffa.
Ooh,
You can
that's-
walk in the cave, you can walk on it, on top. There are puffins everywhere, and when you're on the boat, there are whales and dolphins swimming next to you. We jump
that's
across
dope.
to Northern Ireland, which you can actually see from Scotland, fun fact. And we start off with the Giant's Causeway, Carrick-a-Reid Rope Bridge, the Titanic Museum, the Dark Hedges, and now for the overseas territories, the Gibraltar Rock with its Barbary apes, Jersey, where you can see some cows.
Wait, y'all got monkeys out there? Time out.
Giant's Causeway, Carrick-a-Reid Rope Bridge, the Titanic Museum, the Dark Hedges, and now for the overseas territories, the Gibraltar Rock with
Okay, overseas. I didn't catch when he said overseas territories. That's why I was like, hold on. How do you guys have monkeys in the UK and I didn't know about this? That's sweet.
Barbary apes, Jersey, where you can see some cows, Guernsey, Guernsey and Alderney, some of the most fortified islands on Earth, and go to the Isle of Man to see the TT motorbike races. I mean, overall, I'm so glad I got to do this trip. Give me some love.
It was
Honestly,
so
man,
fun.
That's
We
so much
went
fun.
to Pickles Cave.
Whew, that was a lot to process, and we didn't even scratch the surface.
Or the scratchy bottom.
But alas, we must move on to the next segment of this ever-complicated nation, the physical geography.
Now, when discussing the landscape of the UK, most people, they just kind of like default in their minds to the typical hilly green pastures or the
Facts.
Scottish Highlands and just like a lot of rain.
And yes, that does apply to much.
I'm not gonna lie, yeah. When I think of the UK's like naturalness, I'm thinking of like a giant, a giant, area full of sheep. It's like a giant sheep pasture, a little bit of hills action. But yeah,
To the country, but if we're going to be technical, you can also include coconut tree-lined atolls, frozen glaciers, erupting volcanoes, beaches with penguins, and much more.
Let's look at the map to explain, shall we?
First of all, the main part of the country, Great Britain and Northern Ireland, are located in the western parts of the Eurasian plate, with many mini fault lines feeding through, especially in the island of Great Britain. The most general way to divide the island is with the Tees X line, which is an imaginary diagonal boundary that separates the lowlands with the highland regions in the north and west. This geological formation is also what contributes to some hot spring areas along the line, most notably in areas like Derbyshire and the city of Bath. The most notable fault line, though, would be the...
See, like, that's what I mean. Like, we gotta go, like, we gotta see, like, we gotta see Bitchfield, we gotta go see Bath, like, bro, we gotta make this a whole road trip, just, like, stupid town names, bro.
Great Glen Fault up in Scotland.
I'm gonna be honest, I got the dumbest fucking wants to see places. Like, normal people want to see, like, London, and, like, don't get me wrong, I'd like to see London too, and, like, the giant clock tower and castles. I'm like, nah, I want to go see, like, the most stupidest town names. That would be my UK goal.
And which split
That'd probably make a kick-ass YouTube video too, wouldn't it? Hey, let me know in the comments if you made it to this point in the video. Would you guys watch a video, like, if you see a video visiting the UK's dumbest towns, would you watch a video just me just traveling to every single, like, stupid town name in the UK?
splits like a
Or
skull.
I don't know if stupid is the right word. I'll say funny, right? Because it doesn't have to be stupid for it to count under my view. It just has to be, like, a funny name.
Are through the Scottish Highlands, which are the highest part of the country, and also hold the tallest peak of the country, Ben Nevis. This fault line also creates long, deep rift lakes like the famous Loch Ness, which is the most voluminous lake in the entire country, holding nearly double the amount of
I'm not even gonna lie, I did not know the Loch Ness was in the UK. I did not know that. I didn't know where I thought it was, but I did not know that was in the UK.
water in all the lakes of England and Wales combined. If you want to find the lake with the largest surface area, though, you'd have to go to Northern Ireland and visit Loch Ness. If you want to find the longest river, though, many people might mistakenly say it's the Thames, which, although it is an important river that goes through London, it is not the longest. The longest is
that like
actually
the
the
Nile
Severn
River?
River that starts in the Highlands of Wales and meanders through
Like the
England and
Amazon
empties
River?
into Bristol Bay. In any case, if we want to be completely well-rounded on the sovereign
was the
domain of the
Nile.
UK, you could include everything from the tropical beaches of Caribbean island territories like Anguilla and Turks and Caicos.
See, that's where I'd have my main spot at. Like, if I ran the UK when we were losing the world, I would have been like, nah, I'm keeping the tropics. Screw that place. But that's just me.
Montserrat Island actually had an enormous volcanic eruption in 1995 that destroyed the
That's
entire
crazy.
southern part of the island, including the former capital Plymouth. The South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands are the coldest parts of the UK's territories, with permanent glaciers and protected wildlife breeding grounds. The South Sandwich Islands are pretty volcanically active too, especially Mount
The
Belinda,
South
Mount
Sandwich
Curry, and Mount
Islands.
Michael, which create an eerie sight of fire and ice when they erupt. In any case, these are all just examples that show the range
wanna
of what
see
you can
that.
naturally find in areas that fall within the sovereignty of the UK.
Now, despite being a nation smaller in area than the country of Guinea in West Africa, the UK today stands with the 6th largest national economy by nominal GDP in the world.
We used to be
W.
number 5. Many factors attributed to this prosperity growth, such as the Industrial Revolution, or the fact that we were an island isolated, but not too isolated from continental Europe, with access to multiple naval trade routes that we dominated and protected.
Now, this is where I usually take my triple shot espresso break and Noel fills in for the rest of the segment. However, since I'm here in the UK, I guess I'll have to switch things up and do an English breakfast tea break.
Coming right up, here you go, take this.
Oh wow, this is a thing that you guys do.
Sugar?
You're
getting two.
that much. Okay. I mean, it's not bad. It's good, but like, is there any way to make it stronger?
It's as strong as it needs to be.
This man.
Drinking it. Can I try some? I don't hate it as much as I should.
You don't hate it as much as yes.
I'm out.
He's f***ing drinking it. Can I try some? I don't hate it as much as I should.
You don't hate it as much as yes. America and the UK join forces.
All right, the UK. Let's get to it, okay? So historically, many of the parts that made up the UK followed some brutal and ineffective economic practices. For example, people were expected to stay and work in their home parishes even if there was no work. Those that wandered off to find work elsewhere were deemed vagabonds, and if caught, were subject to things like whippings or being put into stocks. Yeah,
Damn!
that didn't work out.
So time out. So how are you supposed to stay and work when there's no work? You mean you're just supposed to sit on your... I mean, okay.
So well. Eventually, though, over time, many parts of what are now England fell into a system of mercantilism, or a policy that attempted to maximize tariff exports with quotas while minimizing imports. That kind of worked, but as you know, most of the world hates tariffs, so eventually they had to drop that system in 1840. The Industrial Revolution was without a doubt a game changer that launched the UK into global dominance. Things like the sewing machine, steam-powered engines, and turbines.
But
the
like, wasn't the UK already like before the Industrial Revolution like running half the like? Wasn't the British Empire already kicking ass long before then? What do you mean? That's what shot them into power. Like what?
Telegraphs revolutionized the entire manufacturing system, where now things were made by machine instead of by hand. Every region had their distinct industry and resources. Newcastle focused on shipbuilding, from Manchester, cotton, Middlesbrough, iron and steel, Scotland, wool and linen. Telegraphs could now send messages from the UK to India in hours. You could arrive to a destination in a few hours via train instead of days by horse and carriage. With this new advancement and advantage, the UK changed their strategy, becoming a hegemonic naval powerhouse, while subsidizing and delegating specific regions for private trading companies to monopolize off of. For example, the Muscovy Company was in charge of trading with Russia. The East India Company took over the Indian Ocean, and the Hudson Bay Company was in charge of Canada. Granted, much of their economic activity was also riddled with labor from enslaved African peoples, even though it was never recognized in British law. Most of the about 2.5 million people were transported to the Caribbean, the second most popular destination after Brazil, to work on mostly sugar plantations between the 17th and 19th centuries. Eventually, slavery was abolished in 1807 with the Slave Trade Act. However, in practice, it still went on for over 2 more decades, until the Slave Abolition Act was passed in 1833. Of course, this was a dark moment of history. In 1807 with the Slave Trade Act. However, in practice, it still went on for a destination after Brazil, to work on mostly sugar plantations between the 17th and 19th centuries. Eventually, slavery was abolished in 1807 with the Slave Trade Act. However, in practice...
So how did slavery be abolished in 1807, but yet slavery still went on until 1833? How... Like, what happened? Were they just like, yeah, slavery, we probably shouldn't do that anymore, but yeah, they want to keep doing it. And then, like, 1833, they're like, alright, come on, time to let them go. Like, come on, hurry up. Any day now. like, why wouldn't they have, like, freedom at 1807? Why wait that long? That's just stupid.
Practice, it still went on for over 2 more decades, until the Slave Abolition Act was passed in 1833. Of course, this was a dark moment of history for the UK. Eventually, those sugar plantation islands would gain independence and form new nations like Jamaica, Barbados, and most of the Lesser Antilles Islands. Overall, you can see how the story of industrialization mixed with naval trade were key factors. And speaking of naval activity, you can occasionally find things like gray seals and basking sharks in the waters around the UK. The story of industrialization mixed with naval trade were key factors. And speaking of naval activity, you can occasionally find things like gray seals and
Okay, I'm sorry, bro. That's the ugliest goddamn shark I've ever seen in my life. I've caught a shark, okay? I'm proud of the shark I've caught before. But what the hell is that ugly thing? I mean, that thing looks like it had, what's that damn fish that, like, is at the bottom where, like, it comes up looking like goo? Somebody's smart enough to know what I'm talking about. Like, it stays at the bottom of the ocean, but then, like, the pressure when you bring it up, it, like, kind of, like, flops down. That ugly son of a bitch. This thing looks like it had, like, a great white shark had kids with that. What the hell?
basking sharks in
Thing looks like Squidward's cousin.
the waters around the UK. And to talk
That's Mr. Krabs' daughter right there.
more about the wildlife, here's Gary Harlow. You look a lot like Caleb.
I'm back! You can't get rid of me and my amazingly accurate Aussie accent. So,
What in the wannabe Steve Irwin shit is this?
First, let's focus on Great Britain. Today there are 14 national parks, 9 in England, 3 in Wales, and 2 in Scotland. There aren't many large mammals found on the island. Today, the largest native mammal is the red deer. Most of the predators like wolves and bears were hunted to extinction centuries ago. Those bearskin caps worn by the Queen's Guard were actually made from Canadian black bear pelts. As a temperate climate zone, reptiles are not very common. Only 3 native species of lizard exist, and all snakes except the European adder are non-venomous. The national animals of the UK all make no sense. For England, it's the lion, which is not even native to the European continent, let alone the UK. Whereas for Scotland, it's the unicorn, and Wales is the Welsh dragon, which haven't been discovered yet, but I'm on it. Most people will say that the English bulldog is a very iconic animal that epitomises the British spirit. Otherwise, if we are discussing the overseas territories abroad, the wildlife spectrum expands to a wide range that includes things like flamingos and iguanas in Turks and Caicos, to elephant seals and macaroni penguins.
Nah, this seal is just that's my life. Like, bruh, yes. I want just eating a shit ton of food and laying down, not giving a shit.
The South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands, as they are a very popular breeding ground for various species.
I guess that's it.
I guess I'll go back into the blackness now. I fade out. Obscurity is where I go. Where will he go next?
Thank you, Gary. Definitely not Caleb Harlow. Well, as you can see, the ocean has played a huge role in the UK story, whether it be the naval trading routes or the fishing industry. To talk more about the food of the UK, here's one of our British geography peeps, Rob.
Hey, what's going on, guys? So it's my section now. Noah, I'm coming for you. But Britain tends to have a reputation, particularly among the rest of Europe, for having dull, bland, flavourless food. But you know what? I would say that's not the case. Nah, it's just we enjoy more cosy food and we do have flavour. For one, the most popular dish in Britain by some distance is a curry. Most notably is the chicken tikka masala, which wasn't even invented in India.
Chicken tikka masala. What a name.
Claimed to be invented by a Pakistani in Glasgow. The dish we're most particularly proud of has to be the full English. You know, your breakfast. The eggs, your bean, bacon, sausage, black pudding, shredded tomatoes, and mushrooms. Otherwise, some of the top dishes you might encounter on a visit to the UK are things like Yorkshire pudding, bangers and mash, Marmite, but if you do put it on toast, you've got to put it lightly, you can't overdo it. Lancashire hot pot, toad in the hole, Welsh rarebit, Cornish pasties.
What the fuck kind of name is Toad in the Hole? Who came up with that name? I'm sorry.
Bangers and mash, Marmite, but if you do put it on toast, you've got to put it lightly, you can't overdo it. Lancashire hot pot, toad.
Where is the toad in this? Because that looks like some sausage and I don't know what the fuck that is. I don't know, some fucking looks like goddamn grilled cheese.
Food in the hole, Welsh rarebit, Cornish pasties, Scotch egg, beef Wellington.
Okay, nah, beef Wellington looks good as fuck.
Shepherd's pie, steak and kidney pie,
Steak and kidney pie. That's interesting combination. Interesting.
pie and mash with jellied eels, which is a East London Cockney delicacy. We love our meat pies. And of course, you cannot visit the UK without having our most famous dish, fish and chip. Whitby is known for having some of the best.
Where are the chips? I see fries. Where the fuck are the chips? Explain.
Fish and chips in the country. For dessert, you might want to try something like a Eton mess, Bakewell tart, sticky toffee pudding, trifle, and so much more. I hope you guys come and have a bite. See you in the UK. Look out for Rob Peters.
Thank you, Rob.
Hey Noah, he said he's coming for you. What do you say to that?
We'll see. Well, that's all I got for you all today. I will catch you on the next one. Back to you, Barbs and Jay.
Thank you. That was awesome. You did a great job.
We just had a whole section about British food and you didn't mention crumpets.
Oh.
I'll get you a crumpet, hang on.
Oh.
We had a whole session about British food and I didn't think of crumpets. Or tea for that matter. The fuck?
Okay, this is a crumpet. Is that butter? I like butter. I approve.
Demographics.
I've never had
Demographics, okay,
crumpet
no.
in my life.
question is, what does it mean to be British? Simply, beans on toast.
A British person is a Greggs sausage roll.
Knowing the difference between a cheeky Nando's and spoons.
Welcome to Wales. Hey! We actually are a country. We have a language. It's the rugby, the communities, and the sites, as you can see.
Braint yw cael din enyn Gymra. Nid a chlwy arian on de geg. Hon de cad on de galon. A chwef on de wai. Cymru am byth.
For me,
What the fuck language was that?
a Scottish person is someone who has broad, thick accent that is barely recognisable.
Iron Brew, The Proclaimers, Still Game, Haggis. This is our Wee Hill and Glen.
For English breakfast on a Saturday morning, and irony.
You should have a Sunday roast in a pub on Sunday.
Someone of any background, and everyone has a voice, everyone can say what they want.
Bloody brilliant at queuing.
We could be passively, aggressively polite.
Someone who loves to complain about the weather.
Complain about the weather, complain about the football, even when they win.
My thing I think that relates to all British people is the fact that we created all these sports and yet we're so bad at all of them.
Uniform. Damn, that's tough. at least he's honest, right? Shit.
The benches for the year 6, Biff and Chip.
Someone from the UK is very self-deprecating. We love to take the piss.
Then by that logic, I'm British because I roast myself probably more than I roast anyone else, and I roast the shit out of everybody I'm friends with, so.
Kind of like licorice all sorts. Everyone is mixed up with different things, but it's kind of like a big family that kind of argues with each other.
So what is a person from the UK? Well, I mean, that question already in itself kind of has a little bit of a title dilemma in it. Sometimes it's hard to even give a demonym for the people living here, and for many of the people, and depending on the area, the title British might not even be considered applicable.
Yeah, Scottish and Welsh people will typically tell you that they are Scottish and Welsh first. People on the Isle of Man are Manx, and all those penguins in South Georgia are... But for what it's worth, there's so much that goes into the concept of identity. When you break down the typical person that comes from the UK, it's not an easy question to answer.
But what we can attempt to break down is the ethnic makeup of the country in the demographics graph. Henceforth, let's do it.
For one, the UK has just over 68 million people, and as of 2023 is speculated to now have the third largest population in Europe, just surpassing France. When it comes to ethnic makeup, it's a little complicated to come by, but according to the most recent data from the Office of National Statistics, it is reported that the largest group are the white British peoples at somewhere around 87%.
87%? God damn, y'all ain't got no diversity.
Of the country. This category is pretty broad, however. The office designates white into subgroups of white British, which includes Scottish and Welsh, Irish traveler, and whites of other nationalities. The remaining 13-ish% are made up of other non-white ethnic backgrounds, the largest being Asian British peoples at somewhere around 7% of the country. The majority come from South Asian countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. About 3% are black British, mostly from Caribbean and West African backgrounds, and around 2% identify as ethnically mixed individuals, and around 1% identify with other groups.
The UK uses the Type G plug outlet, and they drive on the left side of the road, and fun fact, it's
backgrounds, and around 2% identify as ethnically mixed individuals, and around 1% identify with other groups.
The UK...
The fuck is that outlet?
It uses the Type G plug outlet, and they drive on the left side of the road, and fun fact, it's because of the jousting thing, I believe?
Sort of. So no one really knows why, but one theory is that when medieval jousting happened, you used to hold the sword in your right hand, so it made sense to pass on the left.
The majority of the UK uses the British pound sterling as its currency, sometimes called quid.
That's right.
Except in certain overseas territories, they may use other regional currencies. And that brings us to...
Oh yeah, that reminds me. What is the difference between a pound and a quid? Do explain.
Another quirky aspect of the UK, units of measurement.
So the UK was of course the birthplace of the famous imperial system. However, over the past few decades, the UK has been begrudgingly transitioning partially to metric.
And the choice of units to use is absolutely insane. For example, speed,
miles per hour,
temperature,
centigrade.
For weight,
if the subject is a person, you can use stone or pounds, but everything else kilos and grams.
For distance,
if it's long distance, like on the road, we use miles, unless if you're running, then it's kilometers, but if measuring a person, use feet and inches. Any other object though, meters and centimeters.
For volume,
liters and milliliters, unless it's beer or milk when we use pints, but only cow's milk, not plant milk, in which case they use pints, but pints that are a little bigger than American pints. Yeah, that's a thing.
That's a thing.
Although there's technically no official language, the country's de facto national language is, of course, English, or technically modern English, which is incredibly different from Old English. And during the 16th century, Shakespearean times, an early version of the modern style of English we know today started to evolve.
Thank you, Shakespeare.
And this, of course, brings us to the famous British versus American English scenario.
The spelling subtleties are minor. Brits tend to spell words that are more similar to their their Latin and Germanic origins, whereas Americans spell things more phonetically. Otherwise, some words are just completely different, such as apartment,
flat,
fries,
chips,
crisps, truck,
lorry,
gas,
petrol,
cookie,
biscuit,
trash can,
rubbish bin,
yard,
garden,
sidewalk,
pavement,
road
surface,
candy,
sweets,
faucet,
tap,
spigot,
tap,
flashlight,
torch,
oatmeal,
porridge.
But I do admit I like porridge better because it reminds me of fairy tales from childhood.
I know, just try saying the word porridge and not being just a little bit more happy.
Porridge, it's like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Porridge.
And don't even get me
I agree. You know what? I agree.
started on the accents. In fact, it's speculated that the UK has the largest variation of accents in a single language of any country in the world. Somewhere around 40 to 50, I believe.
It is nuts. Like, if you think about just how small our islands are, and yet the accents have remained really resilient. The two cities of Liverpool and Manchester, only 30 miles apart, they sound completely different.
Otherwise,
that to me is like insane, right? Like, because I can go 30 miles in whatever direction, and people are gonna sound the same as I do. Like, so I find that insane.
The UK also has regionally recognized native Celtic-based minority languages.
For example, Cornish is spoken in Cornwall by about 4 people, and Scottish Gaelic is spoken in Scotland, and by far the biggest of these surviving Celtic languages is Welsh.
There are even Welsh TV channels and shows, radio stations, and almost all road signs are posted in Welsh and English in Wales.
Each of these languages play a vital role to the cultures of their respective communities.
Religion! Now this is an interesting one because for most of the UK's history, there's always been kind of like a complication when it came to religious affairs and leadership.
After the Church of England renounced papal authority from the Catholic Church in 1534, things got tricky. It was kind of like,
"Oh heavens, our dear monarch doth died. Who shalt beeth next in line?
It's insert name of next to kin. But here's the problem. They're Catholic.
Jolly toddly wonkles. No!
Let's burn
Jolly toddly wonkles.
things. That seemed to solve problems.
Burn! And that's like how 28% of their domestic wars started.
In any case, the country is technically a Christian country. Actually, it's technically a theocracy where the crown gets its power from God, long story, and a majority of them hold religion to more of a traditional role, mostly reserved for national festivals, traditions, and even schools and politics.
With all that said and done, it's very important to also highlight the immigrant and non-European communities that make up a very notable demographic of the UK as well.
The black community dates back to the 17th century, when attendants and servants were brought over, such as John Blank during the Tudor dynasty, who was paid about 16 pence a day for his trumpeting skill. Most of the enslaved black people were brought to the Caribbean, not Great Britain, so the black British community stayed relatively small and was mostly confined to Liverpool. It wasn't until the mid-20th century when communities from the Caribbean and West Africa started to set up communities over here.
The UK also has the oldest Chinese community in Europe, arriving in the 19th century, followed by other Asian groups like Indians and Arabs.
Basically, no matter who you are or what you are, everyone born and raised in the UK will have a common understanding of a certain set of values and customs unique to the UK. For one, the schooling system.
Oh, this is a weird one.
Yeah, so you might have got hints of what it's like from the
See, yeah, I'm not even gonna lie. The suits y'all wear are funny as fuck to me.
Harry Potter films and books. Uniforms are worn not
Shout out to the in-betweeners.
only to show school identity, but also to foster a sense of unity and equality.
And you can't make fun of the kids that wear bad clothes because it's like they're all wearing the same thing.
Yeah.
Nobody can, well, you can still bully people.
Also,
but
like, if
just not on clothes.
Education is a huge part of our culture. English, maths, that's right, maths, not math.
You say maths.
You say maths.
Not mathematics.
And science and even physical education are compulsory subjects for every stage until the GCSE exams, and compulsory education ends at age 18.
Yeah, and you have that college is another thing you guys have, but it's like you're...
Well, right, so the word college is for older children, it's for teenagers who've chosen to study something very specific.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas in America, it's just you call college what we call university.
It's where we get wasted because we're saying we're studying, but we're not. Another unique trait of the UK's social atmosphere is the fact that since it is a constitutional monarchy, much of the country has a deep tie to the traditions related to said monarchy.
The inner core of the royal family today has about 50 or so members that are either descended or married into the House of Windsor. Only about half of them actually carry out royal duties, which usually include diplomatic missions and being the face of the UK.
Whatever you want to make of that. Outside of the royal family, of course, many noblemen were appointed leadership roles over certain areas, and today you can still even find many people that are descended from these lesser ranked individuals that had ties to the monarchs.
Well, you can, but you have to go to the very posh public schools, which, by the way, is what we call what you call private schools.
Right.
You're likely to run into people who say, oh, I'm actually 718th in line to the throne because my third father once removed was the 13th Duke and Duchess of Wyndham. Sometimes you'll find heirs to the throne where you least expect it. For example, did you know that Olympian Zara Phillips is the Queen's granddaughter?
No, I did not know that. But we can learn more about the sport of the UK with art, with the sports part.
Sport part.
The sport part.
All right, guys, I'm back. Let's get athletic. And the UK is quite the contender. They have nearly 1,000 medals in the Olympics, and nearly 300 of which are gold. The UK is the father of many types of sports. Rugby, cricket, yes, even soccer or football. And hey, for all you Brits that are criticizing us Americans for calling it soccer, we got the word from you. You invented it. It came from the word association football. So it's kind of...
Yeah, it's your fault. Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, totally.
Although the concept of playing a game where you kick a ball around has been around since the ancient times, the modern version of what we call football was started in the UK in the 19th century using inflated pig bladders. I wonder how they got started with that. They're just like, they're eating some bacon and then they're like, oh, that looks kind of inflatable, you know? So far, England has won 1 World Cup in 1966 against West Germany, and it was in the iconic old Wembley Stadium that has since been torn down due to infrastructure problems, and it was buried under a huge grass mound. Also, the trophy was stolen, but found by Pickles the dog. True story. Either way, football is such a
I need more context to that. Someone explain.
Huge part of the UK's identity, and they could talk about it forever. They even have a subculture of hooligans, or the obnoxious football fans that like always get drunk and start fights and beat each other up. It's almost like a whole other...
I want to be a hooligan. That sounds awesome.
Sport itself, and it's equally entertaining to watch, like drunken MMA, right? Yeah. Otherwise, the modern form of rugby, or rugby union, was invented in the town of Rugby, where it got its name from. However, many will say rugby is actually descended from the Welsh game Cynapin, which is why today some of the best rugby players come from Wales, and it is a huge part of their national identity. Cricket was invented in South England in the 1500s, and is one of the most long-winded sports that can last days to finish. Scotland is also...
I'm sorry. Excuse me? Days? No. Just no. I refuse. I will refuse to spend days. No.
Hub of inventing sports. The modern version of golf was also started in Scotland in the 16th century, and water polo in the 19th century. Scotland is also most noted for their Highland Games, where a bunch of people in kilts compete in a series of strength-based events, like the caber toss, Scottish hammer...
What's the point of the kilt? Do explain.
Throw, and the weight over bar toss. Oh, by the way, I did a DNA test, came back 48% Scottish.
Thought you were Polish.
Yeah, so a lot less Polish than what I thought.
What? I mean, it makes sense though.
They'll take me in.
It makes sense, the gingery.
The ginge. I'm Scottish. I should have known. In Northern Ireland, it's not uncommon to see Gaelic football and hurling being played, native to the island. The UK is also known for their weird and wacky sports and competitions people loving taking part in, such as the Cooper Hill cheese rolling race thing, tar barrel racing, toe wrestling, shin kicking. Let's do that one.
We'll do it after this.
Pancake racing, the stinging nettle eating contest. Yeah, I used to get stung by those things all the time when I was a kid. Like, I cannot imagine eating those things.
Screw that.
Gravy wrestling. These are weird.
I'm sorry. That sounds like some shit that would be done in fucking Kentucky. Like, the back roads, like the backwoods of Kentucky would have 2 old fat ass buck-tooth rednecks doing that. That's not something I'd expect from the UK.
They even have a gurning contest, which is where, in order to win, you have to make, the ugliest face possible. Like that. In any case, that's all I got for you. Cheerio, toodle pop, jolly good, crumbly wrinkles, old chap, and whatever. I'm gonna get this ginger's gonna skedaddle out of here. Toodaloo.
Thank you, Art. Jay, what are some just of the biggest, most notable traditions you've experienced living here?
The day after Christmas, we call it Boxing Day, the 26th of December. It's an extension of the...
Is it a day where everybody just... Is that what happens?
Holiday. Okay. So you get yet another day off work, and there's also a lot of football going on and lots of great stuff on the telly.
Another day off work? Okay. America, bring it.
I thought that was a day where you box each other because you're fighting over cheap prices at the grocery store.
Yeah. Actually, fun fact, the reason it's called Boxing Day is...
Barb's was kind of right. Originally it was supposed to be about giving gifts to the poor, but now it's about getting half-off deals at the mall.
Yeah, Boxing Day. Okay, well, good way to transition into the culture of the UK. And with that, let's bring it to our homegirl, Hannah, with the culture segment.
Hey guys, I'm back. Well, actually now, we're back. If you don't get it, I'm pregnant.
Hannah did a thing.
And Ian, he was there too. Okay, this is gonna be a heavy one because with the UK, it's almost like you're getting an economy-sized multi-package deal of culture and tradition. For one, you must distinguish between whether someone is from England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the overseas territories, or Crown dependencies. To break it down a little easier, you have the Celtic areas, and then you have the Anglo-Saxon side. So let's start with a quick overview of Scotland. Cultural rule number 1, do not attempt the accent. Even if you think you're good at it, just don't.
Nah, I've done that before. Horrible.
You're not good at it.
You're not good at it. You're not good at it. Like, fuck off. You suck.
So bad! Historically, Scotland was divided by clans, each with their own territory. Each clan even had their own plaid tartan design, and Scottish last names often have a Mac before it. Some very notable cultural aspects you will probably encounter at some point include Cayley dances, bagpipes. January 25th is a huge deal, where they celebrate Burns Night. New Year's Eve is called Hogmanay, fireball swinging, and the first person to enter the household is considered the bringer of good luck. And the iconic New Year's song, Auld Lang Syne. You know that song. Auld Lang Syne. Who knew that?
I don't know that song.
That's what they were saying. I was just making words up. Also, everyone in Scotland will tell you to try a deep-fried Mars bar. And now...
Nah, deep-fried Oreos are better. I've never even had a Mars bar, so I really can't say shit, but you know.
Wales. Wales is a unique and very underrated place. It is the land of song, poetry, but at the same time, hardcore rugby, shin-kicking dragons, and powerful castles. In Wales, the daffodil is a symbol used for women and the leek used for men. Typical emblems of the daffodil or leek are worn on St. David's Day, where people clean their rooms and are nice to one another. Are they not nice other days? You get one day a year to be nice.
You know what? Nah. We need that day. Just like a day where everyone's required to be nice. Isn't that like Christmas? I guess they're not required to be nice. You're just supposed to give each other gifts.
And speaking of which, love spoons. In Wales, traditionally, a man would carve a spoon and give it to the woman he loved. They have the Mari Lwyd celebration, where they put a horse's skull on a pole.
I'm sorry, nah.
Of spoons. In Wales, traditionally, a man would carve a spoon and give it to the woman he loved. They have the Mari Lwyd celebration, where they put...
That is nightmare fuel. That's like some shit you'd see on Mr. Pickles.
A horse's skull on a pole. The Don's Gymraeg. The Eisteddfod is a huge deal. Every Welsh person will bring up Tom Jones.
Unusual to be loved by anyone.
Moving on to Northern Ireland. This is a complicated one because it's kind of like if the UK and Ireland had a confusing baby that had an identity crisis. Avoiding all the complicated politics that go into this one. This area obviously has a more Irish Celtic influence and has a mix of Protestant Catholic peoples. This is the only place that allows people to freely choose to have either one or both citizenship of either the UK or Ireland. Keep in mind, this is...
Why wouldn't you just take both? I'm not gonna lie, I'd take both.
Not the official flag of Northern Ireland. Just watch the show Dairy Girls. It does a great job at covering the general idea of what Northern Ireland was like, especially at the end of the conflict era. England! It is in itself super complicated and culturally diverse. It is home to the monarchy, which is a vital aspect of their identity. Keep in mind, although certain individuals can be knighted for their accomplishments, it is only a recognition, not an inclusion into royalty. Generally speaking, English regional cultures are mostly Anglo-Saxon based and concentrated in 6 areas. Speaking of which, England has the widest range of classical architecture. You can find people living in Tudor-style half-timber thatched roofed homes next to Victorian, next to Georgian, next to Art Deco, all in the same block.
That's
also,
crazy.
the UK loves to give regional nicknames to people. Liverpool people, Scouse. Birmingham are Broomies. Manchester is Mank. Newcastle is Geordie. Sunderland is Mackin. Devon and Plymouth folk are Janners. East Londoners are Cockney. And they speak
Okay, now how'd that happen? Explain the. You know what? Now I want to know the backstory to all these like nicknames.
in a weird codified language. Much of what might be considered English culture was spurred off by the English Renaissance. The era created some of the most renowned authors and playwrights, most notable, the man himself, William Shakespeare. As a nation, the UK was the home of many inventions and discoveries. Way too many people to mention. We'll just pop up a list here. Cinema has always been a huge part of UK culture and has been contributing to the world since 1888, when the first motion picture in the world was shot in Leeds by Louis Le Prince.
Hey, Louis Le Prince was not British, he was French.
I know, I'm just saying he made his motion picture in the UK.
D'accord, tu peux continuer maintenant.
Anywho, the fact that the American version of The Office was inspired by the UK version of The Office, and that is one of our most well-renowned television shows, is amazing. I mean, it's one of my.
You know what's crazy is I've never watched The Office, either one, by the way. I've never watched the British or the American Office. I've seen small clips of The Office, mainly this guy in the suit yelling obscenities, but I've never actually seen The Office.
My favorite TV shows of all time.
Honestly, I think we did better though. Come on. Kevin Malone, best character.
Kevin Malone, our version of Dwight is way better than y'all's. I'm so sorry. He really is.
Okay, listen. Y'all's Dwight looks like he's in a damn... he comes from a private school, or I guess what you guys call a public school. He grew up rich as hell. You know, that's what your guys' version of Dwight looks like. Ours, this man looks like he drank 50 Red Bulls, got punched in the face a couple of times, dropped on his head a couple of times, and then was put into the show.
In any case, the territories and crown dependencies all have their own unique traits as well. Jersey and Guernsey and the Isle of Man each have their own languages and confusing political systems. In Gibraltar, people speak Llanito. The Pitcairn Islands has a Polynesian Creole called Pitcairn.
The Pitcairn. Is that... I know it's not true, but I just want to envision that as a giant pit people throw Karens into.
Turks and Caicos has the Caribbean House Evolution Boat Party, and the Cayman Islands have an entire week dedicated to pirates. That was a lot.
I want to go to Pirate Week. Nah, that's another goal. I gotta go to Pirate Week. That sounds fun as hell.
And we didn't even cover a small fraction of everything that could be discussed with the UK culture. And of course, one huge facet of UK culture is their music. And with that, Keith is on tour. Can't leave his dream job to be here. Ugh. So let's give this segment to a British musician. Guys, say hi to David.
And we got David here. Explain who you are. Introduce yourself.
I'm a music nerd from the UK, and I have a channel called David Bennett Piano. Britain has always had a rich musical culture. We had the Elizabethan lute music of John Dowland, the grand Baroque music of Handel, and at the start of the 20th century we had two of Britain's most influential composers, Gustav Holst and Edward Elgar. But it wasn't really until the 1960s that British music became the global cultural export that it is today. Of course, I'm talking about the British invasion, where bands such as the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, the Animals, and of course the Beatles took the world by storm. And then since that invasion, the UK has continued to contribute to global popular music. Many genres of music can trace their origins back to the UK. Heavy metal, for example, was pioneered in the early 70s by the likes of Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and Deep Purple. And many of prog rock's most iconic bands hail from the UK, including Pink Floyd, Yes, and Genesis. Highly successful artists have hailed from every corner of the UK. The most famous Welsh musician is probably Sir Tom Jones. Northern Ireland has Van Morrison, and Scotland's most successful musician is probably Calvin Harris. Britain has always had a strong history of folk music as well, particularly in Scotland, where Gaelic language music is still very popular, with artists like Julie Fowlis continuing the tradition today. Queen, David Bowie, George Michael, Kate Bush, Oasis, Elton John, Radiohead, Muse, Coldplay, the Spice Girls, Ed Sheeran, Adele. Ever since that British invasion in the 1960s, the UK has not stopped churning out culture-defining music, and I'm sure it will play a major part in popular music for decades to come.
Thank you, David. Actually, guys, if you didn't know, Jay is a musician. You make music as well.
Sometimes.
What are some of your biggest inspirations in music?
Is it really, really boring and dull and uninteresting if I say that my favourite band is the Beatles?
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah. Sorry.
Basic! Well, we covered so much in this segment. Jay, what else can we talk about in this episode?
Shall we do the Friend Zone?
Friend Let's see it. Let's see it.
So obviously the UK has a lot of diversity, and of course it's due to their history.
As you can see, Britain has had a fair few dealings with other countries around the world, which brings us to
the animation, the motion graphic.
First of all, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council and founding member of numerous IGOs such as the G7, NATO, World Trade Organization, and Council of Europe, the UK has lots of international ties. Although the Brexit situation did cut them off from EU authority, many of the diplomatic laws and trade deals with the EU are almost exactly the same as they were pre-Brexit, and today the interaction is still there and open. It's just a little different when it comes to certain legislative issues like immigration and economic policy. This is a topic for another time. In any case, the UK has spent...
So basically the UK said, we're still friends, I'm gonna just do what I want.
Last 100 years coming to terms with the fact that they were pretty much seen as the antagonist in so many independent stories across the world. Even though the empire has gone, its influence is still strongly felt around the world, with lots of other countries speaking English, playing cricket, having similar-ish systems of government, and so on. Many of these countries are members of the Commonwealth of Nations, and the monarch is still, at least in a figurehead sense, the head of state of many of them. The UK still has very close relations to the Commonwealth countries, with many of these people settling in the UK, most notably some of the largest diaspora communities from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Ghana, and the Caribbean. The UK, or England in particular, had a massive rivalry with France riddled with war for much of their history. For the last century though, especially after World War II, they've done a complete 180 and have found themselves on the same team in almost all global conflicts, and each side loves to poke fun, but in a loving way, at each other. Interestingly enough, the country they probably have the most in common with, Ireland, has had quite a few scuffles in conflict, especially before the Good Friday Agreement was signed in 1998. Today, however, you can't deny that the citizens of both countries enjoy an extremely close relationship. Many British people have Irish heritage, they intermarry quite a bit, and many have dual citizenship. Australia and Spain have the largest communities of British national residents living abroad. Australia has always been a hotbed destination for immigration for Brits seeking the warmer climate, and specifically for Spain, Ibiza is almost like a little Britain, as so many British people either go there on holiday or to move. In terms of their best friends, however, many in the UK would probably say the USA, and maybe some might include Canada.
Let's go.
The biggest difference
Let's go. Hey, listen.
Difference between the two is that the USA gained full independence through revolution, whereas Canada just kind of stayed British until they slowly over time requested to be given more and more autonomy until technically 1982 when they adopted their own constitution.
See, I feel like Canada is basically what would have happened if we would have lost the war. Like, in all fairness, Canada would have just been bigger.
But still remained under the Commonwealth. It wasn't even long after the Revolutionary War that the UK and USA quickly patched things up, having a shared language, and today a population with about 11% of its people ethnically descended from British roots has not only further helped them communicate and relate culturally, but eventually they've joined in almost all major international conflicts since the mid-19th century. Today they swap each other's films, TV shows, music, and so on. And in Europe, anything USA related will typically have some kind of connection to the UK, as they kind of act as like the link between North America and Europe.
In all fairness, right, like out of any other country, I feel like on my own time I watch the most UK television, right? Like, yeah, like, and that's just true. Yeah.
Overall, the USA and UK may have started sour, but today they have never been closer.
All right, and with that, in conclusion, Jay, you are the Brit. I'm going to give this to you.
In conclusion, sorry about the Empire, but basically Britain is now under control as a modern...
In conclusion, sorry we kind of took over the world a little bit ago, but you know, anyway.
Progressive country that hopes to leave a good mark on the world. This flag actually makes me realise that when Brits go abroad, even though we like to claim that we're not very patriotic, you know, we go abroad and it turns out, yes, we really are. And we really care and we really do love our country. And they hate when people fly their flag upside down!
Isn't it also backwards? Everything's wrong. Well, Jay, I think there was nobody better than you to be in this episode and to co-host with me. Guys, I guess that means stay tuned. The home country, USA, is coming up next.
Do you guys... This was a long video. I almost did the USA video, but I saw it was an hour long, and I'm not sure I could have committed to a whole hour video. But if I get enough requests, we will do the USA video. But tonight, I'm just not feeling it. It's an hour long, and I still need to record more videos. So without further ado, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. You know how YouTube works. If you guys enjoyed this, let me know. I've reacted to a lot of British comedians because, honestly, I feel like the UK is probably one of the funniest countries. So, like, you know, for all my British people who are new from this video. Y'all got a lot of content. And yeah, I'm out. Bye.
With